All of us are born with potential, but not all of us are born with opportunity. Some of the best stories, though, are the ones where somebody takes the hand they're dealt and they transform it into something truly remarkable. And let me tell you, this is one of those stories. Hi, my name is Gabe Bauer, and this is Top Shelf History, where we combine great stories with great drinks. This is the Beaufort Bulldog. It is the cocktail I have made for you today based on the unbelievable life of Robert Smalls, who went on to break free from the chains of slavery to then become a war hero and set his fellow slaves free. Now, Robert's life was destined for struggle. In 1839, Robert was born a slave much like his mother Lydia, and in his early years he served in the house of his master, John McKee. As Robert got older, his master realized that he could be far more useful to him in his shipping enterprise, and so he took Robert at the ripe age of 12 and moved him to Charleston to begin working on the docks. It was grueling work. Robert was a lamplighter, a stevedore foreman, a rigger, a sailor, and a sail maker. I mean, he did pretty much everything. But by the time he got to adulthood, he had become a master sailor and an expert navigator of the Georgia and South Carolina coastlines, something that would become extremely helpful to him in the future. But despite all of the grueling work, not all of it was fatiguing. See, in between the laborious hours on the docks servicing with the Southern traders, Robert caught the eye of a woman, Hannah Jones. Hannah herself was a slave and was working as a hotel maid in one of the hotels in Charleston. And despite being 12 to 14 years Robert's senior, she was enamored by his brashness, his hopefulness, and his youth. And for Robert, he was also enamored with her. And despite their situation and their fact that they were slaves and the age difference, they decided to get married in 1856 while Robert was just 17. The two had 3 children together, but Robert's only son, Robert Jr., would pass away as a toddler from smallpox. But Robert knew that he was meant for more than the slavery that had been thrust upon him from birth. So he was searching for a way to find freedom for both him and his family. Now, he had heard that others were able to buy their freedom from their masters, and when he approached his and Hannah's masters to see if he could buy their own freedom, he realized that the price was far too steep to pay, practically impossible to actually afford. And at that moment, he realized they would have to escape. Now, while they were trying to find an opportunity to finally escape, the South Carolina delegation was knocking over dominoes. In December of 1860, they voted to secede from the Union, and 11 states followed quickly thereafter, taking up arms against the people they once called their countrymen. Robert would hear the firing of cannons and the first shots of the war as Fort Sumter fell to the Confederates in 1861. Soon after, Robert would be thrown into the battle, or should I say the battle ocean, as he was forcibly conscripted into the Confederate Navy. Robert had been looking the whole time to find an opportunity to free himself and escape from this horrible life, but now he was a pawn for his own captivity. And on May 12, 1862, him and his fellow black crewmates serving aboard the CSS Planter found their final opportunity. The ship was docked in South Carolina, and her officers were going on shore for the evening. They looked at their now masters/officers and said, "Can we bring our families aboard just for the evening?" And the officers said, "Sure, as long as they're gone by curfew." As the families came on board, Robert looked at his wife and at the fellow black crewmen, and he said, "This is it. This is our opportunity. This is our moment, our chance to escape." Now, despite some craziness, they realized, after all, this was freedom or death. There was no going back after trying this, but they could do it. And guys, they did. Robert was an expert sailor, and he knew all of the Confederate Navy's tendencies and their signals. They passed through checkpoint after checkpoint, patrols and forts, all under Confederate rule, and they didn't even suspect a thing. By the time that they got to the Union blockade, which was not too far offshore, he told his men to lower the Confederate flag and raise the white banner. Robert was a Union hero now, and a free one. But Robert wasn't done fighting. Oh no. He became part of a lobbying group to get free blacks to serve in the Union and fight on the side of freedom. And they were successful. And Robert himself returned to the battlefield, returning to the shores of South Carolina, this time under a different flag. And he fought in 17 different battles by his own account. He was even made captain of the now USS Planter, the same ship that he had captured in trying to escape to freedom. And from all the earnings that Robert was able to gather from his service in the war and from capturing the ship, the Planter, he was able to return back to his home of Beaufort and buy the house of his former master, John McKee. What a turn of events. But as Robert laid down his arms, he took up his politics, and he served 4 terms as a part of the Republican delegation in South Carolina, creating a veritable black political paradise in his own district. And despite fierce and strong white Democratic opposition, Robert knew that he wasn't going to allow the opinions nor the efforts of those who opposed him stop him from reaching his dreams, and he would be part of political life until the end of Reconstruction. Man, he was a slave, a sailor, a captain, a war hero, a politician, and an icon. What a man. Robert, you deserve a good drink. Let's start the Beaufort Bulldog. Now to start our drink, we are going to put in 2 ounces of Palmetto Whiskey. Now, when I was at my liquor store, I saw this and I thought, a whiskey made in the Palmetto State? Seems too good to be true, but I gotta say, there's actually a lot of complexity in the flavors between the smoky and sweet notes that are common with most whiskeys here. It almost reminds me similar to like a spiced rum in some ways. Although I know it's a little different, it's kind of difficult to really pinpoint where all the flavors are coming from, but I like the complexity in between those 2 very iconic notes that you see with a lot of whiskeys. Next, we're going to follow that up with 1 ounce of Grand Marnier. Sorry, I was indecision here. Now, Grand Marnier is a combination of orange liqueur and cognac. Now, this is great when you're adding a drink because we're going to get a lot of citrusy notes here, but we're also going to get a lot of brightness and extra added complexity from the cognac. So that extra body is going to give a little bit more dimension to our drink, and which is why I want to add it here. Also, since Robert was a sailor, I feel it's fitting to add some citrus notes. As we all know from the age of piracy, and most other sailors will think of rum and citrus, and that was mostly to prevent scurvy. But here I think it's also a good tribute to pretty much any sailor. Next, we're going to follow that up with 2 ounces of pure pineapple juice. Now, why pineapple? Well, because I feel like if I was a sailor out on the sea and, you know, I was working all day and there was the sun beating down, there's the salt in the air, a pineapple drink would just be so refreshing. And I feel like Robert would agree with me here. So we're going to add in 2 ounces of our pure pineapple juice here. Pour that on in. Then I'm going to add a little bit of ice and pop on our shaker and give it a shake. There we go. And that's all nice and combined. And we are going to then strain into our pre-filled glass that has been filled to the brim with ice. Fumble around with the strainer a little bit of a klutz, my apologies. And look at that, just gorgeous yellow golden drink. Now that is going to be sweet and delicious, but to remove some of our overly sweet notes here, we're going to lighten it up with some club soda and add some extra carbonation. That's just going to be so delightful. Oh yeah, that is beautiful. Then finally, to garnish our drink, we're going to throw in an orange peel to give it some nice citrus notes and also to give a nice aromatic sense. So I'll just do that, twist it, and stick it in. And lastly, stick in a straw. And there you have it, the Beaufort Bulldog. And I gotta say, that is a drink that I think anybody would like, and a proper distinguished Southern gentleman, just as Robert Smalls himself, I'm sure would enjoy. It reminds me of something refreshing you'd have on a hot day. Well, let's give it a taste. Oh yeah, that is utterly delightful. That is something that would just be wonderful to have. You're sitting on your porch, as I'm sure, Robert Smalls was doing while he sat on his former owner's porch, and having that drink there after a long, hard day's work. That is certainly something I think that anybody would enjoy, and a true tribute to the man, the Bulldog himself, Robert Smalls. And why I call it the Beaufort Bulldog, it's because he never stopped fighting for his freedom, and I think this drink is just a wonderful culmination of everything that is great about Robert Smalls. We have the complexity, the delicious, amazing notes of the Palmetto Whiskey from, when he was in South Carolina and he had to struggle, and there's a lot of complex things there, to the citrusy notes of the Grand Marnier and the brightness of the cognac as he finally reached his freedom, and then to the wonderful overarching sweetness of the pineapple juice that just brings it all together, almost kind of like having that sweet taste of freedom, and then also the sweet taste of victory of being able to buy your former owner's house. Talk about karma. And it just comes together so wonderfully. The club soda really brightens it up, adds that extra, carbonation. It's a delicious drink, something I'll just do this all day. I don't know about you. I'm gonna watch the sunset and just have one of these. You could have this on the beach, you could have it, on your farm. It really doesn't matter. But to you, Robert Smalls, this is all for you, sir. And that sounds like last call. One of the more interesting things in regard to Robert Smalls' life really was his marriage. I mean, it wasn't the fact that he married a woman that was 12 to 14 years his senior. That itself was rare. But slave marriages in general were something that was kind of amazing in terms of how different they were to now, right? Because we can't really, as modern day, Westerners, or really just modern day civilians, we don't really see slavery in the way that it was before, and we don't really understand all the implications therein. And marriage as an institution only recognized people in legal standing, and because slaves at the time weren't recognized as legally people, their marriages weren't blessed by anyone. They weren't recognized by the civil state, and they weren't recognized by some churches either. And as a result, they actually had to change some of the vows in terms of, instead of from death do us part, to from death or distance do us part, because there was the chance that your wife got sold or your husband got sold, and then you guys would be put on different parts of the country, or different parts of the earth for that matter, right? I mean, it was just unbelievable to think about. And Robert Smalls has a very unique situation in his marriage, and I'm painting the picture here because it's important to understand how unique his marriage was. Not so much in the age difference, but also in the fact that in some sources have claimed that Robert and Hannah were actually able to live together despite the fact that they had different owners. And they were actually able to make some money, although most of that money went back to their owners, as part of being slaves, right? But they also had a couple of funds to be able to subsist themselves because they were still useful, right? She was a very good hotel maid. He was a very good sailor, one of the best, as we found out from history. And it's just incredible to see the difficulties of slavery marriage. I mean, just marriage is difficult in general, but to add on all of the other troubles that would come with it and the fact that you're not viewed as human is mind-boggling to say. And the fact that Robert was able to have the blessing of being able to be with his wife is incredible to have, even in the face of so much adversity and so many troubles. And I feel like that must have been such a helpful thing to have your wife at your side for as long as he did throughout all of his years, and be able to push forward to get them their freedom and certainly something worth further investigation, but that's just a little tidbit into what it was like to be married as a slave, and also for Robert Smalls' situation as well. Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to learn about the man who first inspired Robert Smalls to try to buy his freedom, you can find that story at topshelfhistory.com. It'll be part of our After Hours, which is our exclusive premium content for our premium members. If you also like to check out any of our other historically inspired cocktails, you can find them here. You can also find them at our website. But from everyone here at Top Shelf History, remember, history is better with a drink. Cheers.